All right, welcome back in here to Alive Now from Fox, a football Sunday now, week 6, and of course, a live look there in Tampa. No game being played at this venue, but all of our thoughts are with the community there in that region on the Gulf Coast of Florida after all they had to deal with Hurricane Milton making landfall south of there. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers actually departing town a little bit earlier, taking some friends and family along with them to New Orleans for a key NFC South game. But of course, they are continuing to feel for that community as well. I want to put up just this a tweet from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers saying, "More than a game," and some of the quotes from Mike Evans, a staple of that community, a staple of that franchise. "We're trying to play for something bigger," says Mike Evans, and he also giving back in a big way. Florida, we are with you, Mike Evans and his wife Ashley Evans, and the Mike Evans Family Foundation donating $500,000 to various organizations in the Tampa Bay area for aid relief for the hurricane that slammed into that coast. So certainly we're thinking about all of those communities, and like we did a couple weeks ago, we're making sure that today is a focus on football, a maybe back to normalcy, a state back to normalcy of what's obviously a very difficult time as they will have to pick up the pieces. So much debris, so much water, so much wind impacting that area. All right, let's continue on here and bring into the conversation right now AP NFL senior reporter Rob Maye. I know you live in the Tampa Bay area, and I hate to talk to you time and time again about hurricanes hitting Florida and the impacts on that community. We talked a couple weeks ago as Tampa was hosting the Eagles. They did get a big win in that one. Take me through what you experienced this last week and how much is the Tampa Bay community rallying around these Bucs?
Yeah, Andy, I'm fairly new to hurricanes here in Tampa, 3 years in, and now it's 3 or 4 hurricanes, but the last 2, obviously the most significant, Helene, still reeling, so many folks reeling from the impact of Hurricane Helene, and then Milton comes through here, and it's a lot closer to everyone in the Tampa area. I'm right outside Tampa, so much damage. So much wind, so much rain. I've never heard wind so loud that it sounded like whistling, like it sounded like birds. And we're questioning, my wife and I and the kids, like, what is that? Is that what sort of bird makes that sound? And no, it was the hurricane, the winds, and the damage left behind. And obviously, as you mentioned, the Buccaneers took off and they went to New Orleans, practiced there. And that organization is such a first-class organization, Andy. They took invited all of the family members, found them, got them hotel rooms if they wanted to escape, took them with them to New Orleans, and they were able to focus on football. But so many of those players, so many of those guys, they live in and around the areas of Davis Island, the water, wherever it may be, and they've got damages, they've got issues that they got to deal with. But today they're going to focus on football. They're going to take on the New Orleans Saints, try and take people's minds away from reality and what's happened and cleaning. It's not fun taking down hurricane shutters, putting them up, cleaning the debris, the damage. We're dealing with some issues ourselves, looking at the roof and shingles blown off. But then you think about it, Andy, and you go, it could have been so much worse for so many people. And if it's just some property issues that we have to deal with, I feel blessed that it could have been so much worse. And you feel for those who are even impacted in a more significant and in a greater way.
Yeah, that is so very well put from you, Rob. And of course, like you mentioned, they're going to New Orleans, a hospitable host, as New Orleans familiar with what hurricanes can do to a community. Yeah. So it's good to see 2 opponents, fierce opponents on the field, have each other's back off the field on a very difficult week. And I do want to ask you, because the NFL is so much about focus, so much about motivation as well. Do you think this will inspire the Bucs to come out firing today to really show Tampa Bay who they're all about?
I think so, Andy. Not only what they've encountered and experienced the past week with the hurricane, but also if you go back to that loss on a Thursday night against the Atlanta Falcons, a game they had in hand, a game that they should have won if not for a play here, a play there, and then even a poor call, a call that was a face mask that wasn't called, that kind of impacted the game at the end. This is a team that could have been sitting right now at 4-1 in sole possession of first place in the NFC South. And the Atlanta Falcons now are in first, and the Saints are right behind them. Although they're struggling a little bit and they don't have their quarterback, they've historically been a difficult opponent for these Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So they know they have to focus in on this game. They want to hit that bitter taste of that last defeat, that last loss out of their mouths, and they want to really go out there and give something positive to this community that seems to really rally around them. They really have embraced Baker Mayfield, and we've talked about the transition from Brady to Baker. They've really rallied around and embraced this team, and just such a lovable bunch of guys on this team, and they're able to go out there and they've had success, and they want to hold on to that NFC South title. They've won it 3 years in a row, and this is a big one. This is a division opponent on the road after a game that you should have won. Right. They really need to go out there and focus in.
Yeah, they certainly have played up to their opponents or down to their opponents, whoever they played this year. So we'll see what they can do in New Orleans today. It's going to be an exciting game, and well put, Rob. We're glad everything is going all right for you, and it's good, well put, that obviously property can be replaced, but those lives impacted, obviously, is very difficult to see. Let's move on to another game. I know you're familiar with the Philadelphia Eagles as they take on today the 1-4 Cleveland Browns in this matchup coming off the bye. I know there was a lot of conversation about the Philadelphia Eagles, their collapse late last year, a 2-2 team. How much can this be a refresher for the Philadelphia Eagles, because their stretch coming up, not the toughest? They can reel off a few wins in a row. What do we expect coming off a bye for Nick Sirianni and that team?
Exactly, Andy. They have a very beatable opponent in the Cleveland Browns today, and then some games where they can start to stack up some victories and feel confident. But make no mistake, the Eagles are not good enough right now to look past any opponent. They have to go out there against the Cleveland Browns team that could be dangerous if they play up to the expectations they had coming into the season. This is a defense that was stingy last year, one of the best, the top-ranked defense, and they're not at that level this year. And obviously they've had so many issues with Deshaun Watson. But the bright side for the Eagles is that they're getting healthier over the course of this bye. When we last saw Philly play against Tampa, they didn't have both of their starting wide receivers, A.J. Brown and Davante Smith, and they didn't have their Pro Bowl right tackle in Lane Johnson. They will have all three in the lineup, and that makes for a different Jalen Hurts. When he has all of his weapons around him, he's one of the most dangerous quarterbacks in the NFL. And of course, as you're showing Saquon Barkley walking into the stadium right now, you can't forget about Saquon Barkley. He's a big part of this offense, and he's that much better when the defenses have to be aware of A.J. Brown and Davante Smith. They can't stack that box, stack that middle, and play to stop Saquon. So I think this Eagles team is in a decent spot right now where they can start to build confidence, feel better, because if they don't come out of this game with a victory, that hot seat for Nick Sirianni is only going to get hotter. It's scorching. And of course, the city is still reeling from the Phillies being eliminated by the New York Mets. So they desperately need something good to feel about with the Eagles. And if they don't get it, they're going to be vicious in their attacks against Sirianni and this team.
Yeah, the Philly fans, the Philadelphia fans, a unique bunch, and vicious might be a perfect way to put it. And you mentioned Nick Sirianni, and we always talk about the bye week and where it comes and if it's beneficial to a team. This one was ultimately beneficial. Nick Sirianni, though, how much of a hot seat do you think he could be on if they stumble over opponents they should beat over the next few weeks? Is that something that we're accustomed to? Because we talked with the New York Jets. They generally don't fire a coach mid-season. Is this more common, and how hot could that seat get for Sirianni?
Yeah, typically you don't want to have a bye this early, but it came at the right time for the Eagles, given their injuries and given the way that they have performed. And it gave Sirianni an opportunity to take a step back and really reevaluate and focus in on some some of the decisions that he's made, the mistakes that they've made, and he's kind of relinquished all of the defense to Vic Fangio and the offense to Kellen Moore and taken more of a step back CEO role of the team. Yet he's the head coach. Everything, he's ultimately accountable for the product on that field. And just like the Jets, although Woody Johnson had never made an in-season decision to fire a coach prior to Robert Saleh this week, similar with Jeffrey Lurie and the Eagles. Only Chip Kelly, who was fired with 1 game remaining in the 2015 season, I believe it was, before Peterson came in. That was the only time that Lurie did that. I don't think that Sirianni's in danger of losing his job at any point in this season. However, a terrible loss to whether it's Cleveland or another beatable team could change all of that, because you do have a guy they could turn to an interim, and Fangio's been a head coach before. Kellen Moore's a guy who had been interviewed for head coaching opportunities. So they have guys in-house. I don't think it'll play out that way. I think they'll give Sirianni the leash to be able to at least coach the rest of this season. But if things fall apart completely, all bets are off, Andy.
Yeah, circumstances could change very quickly with that vicious fan base in Philadelphia. They love a winner, and they won't be satisfied with anything less. All right, Rob, thank you again. I appreciate your time. We're glad you are safe. Your family is safe there in the Tampa area. We appreciate your time talking always on Live Now.
Thanks so much, Andy.
All right, thanks so much. All right, let's continue on here on Football Sunday Now. I'm Andy Mack. A couple Live Now looks around the league in New Orleans, the site of this Tampa Bay New Orleans game coming up in just a little bit. Also a live picture right now in Philadelphia, the Cleveland Browns, Philadelphia Eagles getting going in just a little bit. And also maybe a little bit of an overcast day in Green Bay, Wisconsin, the Arizona Cardinals from their sunny skies of Arizona traveling up there. The Packers fans already gearing up for this game. I'm Andy Mack. We're back after this. All right, welcome back in here to Football Sunday Now. I'm Andy Mack, a live look there in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Certainly feeling more like the football season as we're going into week 6. Plenty of key matchups as well around the NFL. A good matchup today against the Houston Texans, taking on a new era in New England. Drake Maye, the 3rd overall pick, getting the first start, named the starter. I want to put up this post here from the NFL saying the Drake era begins in New England, a new era there. And we're going to be joined right now by NFL reporter, columnist for Fox Sports, Henry McKenna, on the ground in Foxborough. Henry, thank you so much for joining us. I know there's a lot of hype around Drake Maye. He's the last of the really rookie QBs to get their starts. What do we expect out of him today? And it's going to be a tough opponent there in the Houston Texans defense.
Yeah, I mean, what we want to see from Drake Maye is good decision making. I think the last time we've really seen him was preseason. And for me, training camp, I was monitoring his progress. And I think the biggest thing that he was making strides in was seeing the defense at an NFL speed and making sound decisions within the Patriot system. But clearly he wasn't there yet in terms of like a trustworthy quarterback in terms of playing in week 1. And so we saw Jacoby Brissett for a few weeks. Patriots were ready to make a change, and now we get sort of the dawn of Drake Maye's career. And look, I want to see some explosive plays. That's what's so exciting about a prospect like Drake Maye. He has all the arm talent in the world. I just want to make sure that he doesn't throw any interceptions. I don't want to see any strip sacks that might end up costing this team, because the Patriots are all about ball control. They're all about possession, and they want to let their defense give their offense good field position. But that can't happen if Drake Maye's turning the ball over. So that's kind of where his plan for the day will begin, is care with the football.
Yeah, that is a very good point. That's always a key for a quarterback, especially a rookie. And I do want to ask you, because he's going up against the Houston Texans team that do love to pressure the quarterback. D'Amico Ryan's notably a defensive guy. What do we envision in how they're going to scheme it up? How much are they going to try to confuse the rookie?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the worst defenses a rookie could start against. That's why I was kind of pleading with the Patriots to give him another week to rest, let Jacoby Brissett take care of this week, if only because it's going to be, exactly what you said, exotic blitzes, lots of pressure. This is one of the hardest fronts to block, and the Patriots' offensive line, is one of the worst in the NFL right now, and they're constantly trying new combinations. We might see a new center, for example, starting this week for New England. So, and a guy that they just signed off the Raiders practice squad. It's sort of like disrepair and constant. It's like maintenance on a really old and terrible house, right? Like they're just constantly trying to patch holes and plug the situation. And when you go against a team like Houston, where not only do they have the coaching, but they've got the high-end talent, it's going to cause problems for an offensive line. It's going to cause problems for a young rookie.
Yeah, and I do want to ask you, because maybe the bar is set pretty high. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels doing great. Bo Nix in Denver off to a winning record as well. And, of course, the guy on the other sideline, C.J. Stroud, led the Houston Texans in his rookie year to a playoff victory. And C.J. Stroud was notably asked this week if he has any advice for Drake Maye, and he said, not this week. When you look at the other sideline, when you look at C.J. Stroud, how special of a QB is he?
Yeah, I mean, he had one of the best rookie seasons of the history of the NFL last year. So truly transcendently talented, right? We're seeing Jaden Daniels do something similar, but from a passing standpoint, it's not really all that comparable. Stroud was sort of head and shoulders on his own. So I think he's on his way. I think this year, we're seeing what you could call a sophomore slump. At least that's what I've seen from the game film. He's not the most confident quarterback. For example, last week when Nico Collins left the game with an injury, and we won't see Nico Collins this week because that injury is going to hold him out for a few weeks, hamstring issue. We saw C.J. Stroud not throw a touchdown. He couldn't get the ball in the end zone after Collins left the game. So that left the Bills to try and mount the comeback, to bring the deficit, close that gap. And we didn't see Stroud slam the door. And I want to see a little bit more authority from Stroud, certainly in this game where it's very winnable, but in future games. To take away his best weapon in Nico Collins, He's still got Tank Dell. He's still got Stephon Diggs. Look, I want to see CJ Stroud elevate into sort of like this unbeatable mode that we see from, he beat the Josh Allen, right? So, yeah. But also, compared to the unfair, which is Patrick Mahomes, yep. I want to see Stroud kind of step into that different stratosphere of not just like one of the best rookies we've ever seen, but I want to see him be one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen.
No, that is so very true. And, of course, without Nico Collins, we'll see where they go. They do get Joe Mixon back, though, this week. That is going to be good for them, handing the ball off to him coming over from the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, that's going to be good to see. I do want to ask you, because they are 4-1, but they are vulnerable. They didn't slam the door, like you said, against the Buffalo Bills. They let the Chicago Bears, Caleb Williams, hang around a little bit. Their schedule isn't very tough, too tough at least, and AFC South has some holes as well. Do you think they need to shore up some things? Do you think they really are vulnerable this year? Do you think does their record indicate what they actually are?
I think it does, if only because the division that they're in is worse than they are. I think this is going to be the kind of situation where luckily they get to cruise along through the season, end up maybe the 2 seed in the AFC. They've got a competent quarterback who really doesn't make mistakes. Like, we can complain about the fact that maybe he's not shutting the door, but he's not really like opening it for teams. And the defense is good enough that they can work sort of in concert with their quarterback. And it's just sort of like an all around well-built team. They are going to beat the middle class and the lower class of the NFL with consistency. That's kind of what you need to be to make the playoffs. Are they going to unseat the Chiefs? Like, I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think that they're there yet in terms of like seeding going into the playoffs. But maybe, maybe like we'll see CJ Stroud hit a different like register, on the eliteness scale, so to speak. And maybe we'll see sort of like a second half push. But for now, I think they're kind of like tinkering. They're kind of figuring out, how they can be the best team in the NFL. They're just not there yet.
Yeah, similar to the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud and the Texans, they're feeling pretty good where they're at, 4-0, 4-1 respectively, and people still feel like, hey, they have room to improve. So that is good, maybe a good place to be in the NFL. There could be worse places to be. All right, Henry McKenna, thank you again. I appreciate your time, as always, here on Football Sunday Now. Enjoy the game. Stay warm there in Foxborough. Enjoy Drake Maye's debut.
I appreciate you.
All right, thank you so much. All right, let's continue on here on Football Sunday Now. I'm Andy Mack, another live picture there in Green Bay, Wisconsin. A very exciting game. The Arizona Cardinals taking on the Packers. We'll have much more on all the top headlines after this. Welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox Alive. Look there at the Caesars Superdome, the site of the Super Bowl, coming up in February here on Fox, and we'll have much more about this game as the New Orleans Saints, a new quarterback in place, that being Spencer Rattler, replacing the injured Derek Carr. For more on this, let's go out to my interview with Chris Myers on the call for this game on Fox a little bit later on today. Welcome back in here to Football Sunday now, heading into week 6 of the NFL season, and every team is dealing with injuries, but the New Orleans Saints in a big way as durability questions around their quarterback, Derek Carr. He will be out for several weeks, and that means in his place, the game ball getting going to Spencer Rattler, the starting quarterback for the Saints in week number 6, taking on a very difficult Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. Let's bring into the conversation a guy on the call, a friend of the program, Chris Myers. Chris, thank you so much for joining us, and give us a breakdown. Why did the Saints pick Spencer Rattler to go under center for this team? Why do they think he has the best chance to win for New Orleans this week?
Well, I mean, they've had injuries on their offensive line, and this is a tough loss for the Saints with Carr and his leadership and settling in this offense. I think the thinking was that Rattler is very mobile. We saw that young in his college career before things changed a little bit. And he had a very impressive training camp, preseason for them. And I'm a little bit not shocked, but it's like, wow, they're really giving this guy the chance. But he certainly can throw. I think he's inspired teammates around him with his energy. And I guess with the injuries, probably the fact that if there's a pass rush, this is a guy that can avoid it. Maybe even better than a guy like a healthy Derek Carr would have been able to evade. So it gives him a fighting chance against a Tampa defense that blitzes as much as anybody, and blitzes very effectively to put pressure on the quarterback, and blitzes even to stop the run.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about it because Derek Carr is out, but Taysom Hill also dealing with injuries. If he were a healthy guy, do you think he would be a person they plug and play at quarterback for the Saints?
Yeah, and that would have been the option, that probably just given his experience, even though he hasn't been able to win a starting quarterback job, Taysom Hill is very familiar with the offense and obviously a bigger, stronger kind of runner, different than Spencer Rattler in that regard from the quarterback position. So, and he might have even shared time with the other Hainer, who they had considered and was really listed as the backup, at least early in the season, to Carr. So this is a double dose of defeat, I should say, going into the game. When I say defeat, I mean drawbacks for the Saints to try and win a division game.
Yeah, against a very difficult team. Tampa Bay looking good against the good teams that they play, but they maybe have some setbacks against teams they should beat. But let's sizzle your bacon a little bit. Baker Mayfield euphemism, as we love to talk about him. He's got 13 touchdowns, 11 through the air, 2 on the ground. What makes him go, and how unique of a quarterback is he for the Tampa Bay Bucs?
Well, he's still not even 30 years old, and he's got a lot of football in his life that he's played. And I think we think of him as older because of where he was drafted and the time in Cleveland, and then getting bounced around through Carolina and briefly with the Rams. He's definitely rejuvenated. Physically, he's better off. I guess his decision-making is probably the thing that jumps out the most. And using, using his legs to run wisely instead of recklessly, which was one of the things that probably, and that happens to a lot of young quarterbacks when they come into the league, that probably he learned a lot from, protecting himself from injury. And that's the other part. He gets banged up a little bit, but not enough to keep him out of the lineup.
Yeah, and he's got a good supporting cast around him. Mike Evans really turning it up. Chris Godwin there, the 1-2 punch for them. And thinking around the NFL, how good is this duo of wide receivers for Baker Mayfield? Where do they maybe rank amongst the NFL's best?
Yeah, they're probably the best 1-2 combo. Mike Evans on his way to the Hall of Fame. Chris Godwin doesn't see as much because of Mike Evans, but benefits maybe from the coverage. They also had, they drafted McMillan, a young receiver from Washington, and Trey Palmer the year before as third receivers, which I think really, really helped, as those two were trying to be bracketed by defenses. But I would say that's the best starting wide receiver combo in the NFL. Eagle fans might make an argument there, but they haven't been healthy enough this year. Certainly Minnesota with Addison healthy and Justin Jefferson. You could go Jamar Chase, T. Higgins in Cincinnati, but at least this season, though they all have not been healthy and out there on the field enough to be put in that category, in my opinion.
Yeah, the production is there. And like you said, Mike Evans, a Hall of Famer, and you just look at those stats, and you can't imagine that he's not talked about more with all of those stats there. Let's stick around the NFC South because we also have a matchup as Atlanta going for the trifecta. They knocked off the Saints. They knocked off the Bucs. Now they're taking on a Carolina team that's still struggling a little bit. What do we make of this Falcons squad with Kirk Cousins, and how potent could they be throughout the regular season?
Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, him coming off a 500-yard performance, being named the NFC Player of the Week, and developing the young guys, Drake London and other receivers. Ray McLeod has come around for them as well. Kyle Pitts, the tight end. I think they still expect big things. But what's impressive, and I know you can't do everything, but they don't even average 100 yards running the ball with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, who are two terrific backs. They've had some offensive line issues. I don't know that their defense is as good enough as Tampa Bay's in the division at this point, even though they've added some players like Judon and Simmons at safety to improve. But the offense is one that I think will continue to get better through the course of the year. And they're technically, they win Sunday, they're going to stay on top of the NFC South division regardless of what happens in the Tampa and New Orleans game. So right now, the Falcons kind of are in control of the division because of that head-to-head beating of Tampa Bay. And those are the two teams that I see going down to the wire to ultimately decide the NFC South division.
Yeah, that is so very true. And, of course, they almost knocked off the Chiefs early in the season. They knocked off the Philadelphia Eagles. They're still a little bit of an interesting team coming off of a bye, but they are very, very good. I want to ask you about Bijan Robinson, the running back out of Texas. We thought he had a great rookie year. Are we surprised that he's not making more of an impact? And do you think he might be more of a focal point as we get into these years where injuries are kind of taking a toll and the running game becomes so important as we move into November and December?
Yeah, and when you invest in the quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who we know can light it up, as we just talked about, coming off his Achilles injury, and I think that usually takes a year to a year and a half, and so he'll be more mobile in terms of moving around, which is a plus for him. So in other words, the passing game you lean on, but this is only the second road game for Atlanta. Coming up this weekend in Carolina. So later in the year, when the weather gets dicey and you're playing outdoors, obviously a home game, they don't have to worry about that. And usually in their division, it's not an issue. But in places where they might go, that's where you lean on the running game more. And that's where I think you'll see Robinson and also Tyler Algier. I mean, he's been a 1,000-yard rusher, and he's a good backup. And they kind of share the load, which I think is by design to help protect somebody like Bijan Robinson from wear and tear of a full season.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Of course, this offense with Kirk Cousins looking pretty solid. I know there's some questions about that injury in the early weeks, but it was interesting that they haven't played a ton of road games. We'll see if they go on the road and get some wins. Let's talk about the big news, though, of this NFL week, and that being the firing of the Jets head coach, Robert Saleh. I want to put up this as it was fired mid-season, unheard of in terms of what happens in the New York Jets franchise. They don't really get rid of head coaches mid-season, and there's a lot of talk. Aaron Rodgers pushing back that he had any say, although he did speak with Woody Johnson, the owner, just days before it happening. What do we make of this decision, and how surprising is it, Chris?
Well, I'm not surprised. I'm just surprised maybe the timing of it. I thought they might wait till the end of the year. And even after last year, I thought there were some opportunities to make some changes. However, I don't know how deserving he is to be fired. I would look at the offensive coordinator and what they've not been able to do. And it seems like a team that's, you still had a chance to dig out of it. I mean, teams who make coaching changes and bring interim coaches on, they don't make the playoffs. I mean, that historically, that doesn't happen. So to me, there might have been something more to this with ownership. And Saleh said he himself was surprised, as was Aaron Rodgers. I don't think Aaron Rodgers had the word to say, hey, get him out. Aaron Rodgers just hasn't done his part. I mean, let's be honest. The injury was one thing last year. The game he suffered through interceptions, his offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett, They haven't done their part, and I think they'd admit to that. And to me, that's where the fault begins with this particular Jet team, because they have some players in key spots. They've had injuries like anybody else on defense, but this to me is it looks like it just has the appearance of waving the white flag and giving up on the season by making the head coaching change at this point of the season. And it says something about the dysfunction, I think, of the Jets organization, from even the way that they went after Aaron Rodgers. He was acquired, and the way that they've operated since, even removing the injury from last year and the situation. It just hasn't gone right. And I think Robert Saleh is the fall guy.
Yeah, there's a different feel to this move by the Jets because the Jets don't typically do it. Robert Saleh, Aaron Rodgers, and also Woody Johnson, obviously, was a post from Jake Glazer saying he talked to Robert Saleh, who said he was blindsided by Woody Johnson walking into his office, letting him go, certainly disappointed he wasn't going to give him the opportunity to get things going with what he said was a very good roster. And it's also interesting because the Jets play a couple of nationally televised games. They were in London. Woody Johnson, U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom. How many different interesting facets? And I know you mentioned Aaron Rodgers, that he was disgruntled in Green Bay, that they didn't let him know that they were going to take Jordan Love. Do you think there was any factor, even if he wasn't told in advance, that Aaron Rodgers might have had his hands in this a little bit?
Well, he had his hand in it, and that his arm wasn't delivering on the field. I mean, it wasn't all his fault, but there were moments, excuse me, when you're the guy, you get the money that Aaron Rodgers gets, and you have the credentials, and you're brought in with the Jets. You gotta carry the load. I mean, obviously you can't run the ball and catch the ball for other people or block for other people, as we saw that initial year. But you've got to go above and beyond. You're not just another quarterback who's been plugged in. And I thought him and Saleh had a pretty good relationship. Saleh's a defensive-minded coach who kind of, at least when I was around the team last year, he let his offense operate, the way they needed to. Obviously, he would oversaw things, but he was trying to take care of the defense. You hit on some points there about the ownership and maybe just the embarrassment of the team and the way that they played. And when you're in prime time, you get exposed more. Of course, New York's already the number one media market. Of course, you guys know all that coming in. It's magnified. And I think that did have something to do with if this was Carolina or another situation. And by the way, their coach got fired. Matt Rule and Frank Reich. It wasn't maybe this soon, but he got fired last year during the season. But as you made the point, the Jets don't do it very often. At least they give people an opportunity. Yeah,
we'll see what happens. And they are in the spotlight again, of course, Monday Night Football against the Jets, then Sunday Night Football against the Steelers, and a few weeks later on Thursday Night Football against a very difficult Houston Texans team. All right, Chris, thank you so much for breaking it all down. We look forward to watching you on the call for New Orleans and Tampa. Going to be a fun one. NFC South heating up this year.
All right, take care. Thanks for having me on.
All right, thanks so much to Chris Myers for that. Of course, a live look there in New Orleans, the site of the Super Bowl, coming up in just a few short months, as these weeks matter. Every single Sunday matters as well. And of course, they're talking about that Jets matchup coming up against the Houston Texans in a few weeks. That's going to be on prime time, in prime time. And let's move over to the Houston Texans, because I do want to bring up a post from Fox 26, sports director Will Kunkel saying, "Good morning from Foxborough." And of course, CJ Stroud leading the 4-1 Texans into town as well. Let's be joined right now by Fox 26, Will Kunkel. Thanks again for joining us here on Football Sunday. Now, CJ Stroud was earlier asked this week about advice for rookie QB Drake Maye, expected to make his first start for the Patriots. How do the Texans plan to have this rookie get an introduction to the NFL today? Will?
Man, they're going to confuse the absolute hell out of this kid today. I mean, this is his first career start in the NFL. D'Amico Ryans and this defense are going to show blitz, then not blitz, not show blitz, and then blitz. In his time as the head coach with the Texans, in 5 games against rookie quarterbacks, his defenses have 21 sacks against these kids. And this is Drake Maye's first career start. So it's not like he's got a whole lot of games under his belt to try to get used to things. So it's going to be really interesting to see how things go. And I know you dub it as C.J. Stroud versus Drake Maye. Obviously, they're not even on the field at the same time, but he's going to be compared a lot to C.J. Stroud after he had such a record-breaking year last year when he was a rookie. And C.J. has not played his best football this year as the sun is starting to come out here in Foxborough. So it'll be interesting to see if he can get going against a Patriots team that's 1-4, and they've lost 4 straight as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and Drake Maye might have to call C.J. Stroud on Monday to get some tips for what it's like to be a rookie quarterback in the NFL. I do want to ask you about a big missing piece for the Houston Texans. No Nico Collins, the leading receiver in the NFL. How big of a loss is that for Houston in that offense?
It's a huge loss. Like, you can't lose the best wide receiver in the NFL. And I know people that don't watch the Texans every weekend are like, bro, he ain't the best. Justin Jefferson's the best. And maybe so, maybe. But Nico Collins has the most 20-plus yard catches of the season. He's got the most yards in the NFL so far this season as well. Like, he's doing what it takes to be the best wide receiver in the NFL. Of course, he needs to do it for more than a couple seasons, which he did last year. But I will say this. If you're going to lose a guy of Nico Collins' magnitude, you want to lose it in a room where you have a ton of depth. And I don't know if we have some of the guys behind me. Well, you got Xavier Hutchinson out here. That is part of the depth for the Texans, but you also have you have Tank Adell. You have Stephon Diggs. So you have a room where you have 2 of the best wide receivers in the NFL filling in for Nico Collins. So that's kind of the idea that Nick Caserio, the general manager, wanted to do here with the Texans, is give that room a whole lot of depth, give C.J. Stroud a whole lot of weapons to use so that if one goes down, you're still good. And you still got Dalton Schultz. You have Joe Mixon back in the running back room, and you have Dameon Pierce back on the field this week as well.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. My last question before I let you go here, Will. Joe Mixon back in the fold. Two games here in October in New England and then Green Bay. How important is it to have a strong running game as we move forward this season?
Like, huge. You're not winning the Super Bowl, and that's what the Texans are shooting to do without a running game. And they can't run the ball, seemingly, without Joe Mixon. Like, in week 1, he goes for a $159. He then gets hip drop tackled, which the league did levy a fine against the Bears defender that did that, but he's been out since week 2. It's a huge loss for a team that's trying to vie for that, but they've also continued to stack wins since that game, albeit that Vikings game they've tried to push out of their memory. But they need to be able to run the ball and pass the ball if they want to win the Super Bowl and be contenders down late in the season. So an absolute huge get back for the Texans with Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce, because you got to have that alpha mentality to move bodies and be able to run the ball, especially in the red zone as well, Andy.
Yeah, and Joe Mixon really expressed his displeasure with that hip drop tackle. Hopefully he gets back to 100%, leading this Houston team far into the playoffs. All right, Will, thank you again. I appreciate it. Enjoy the time in New England.
My boy, the world for you, Andy.
All right, thanks so much, Will. Take care. As always, so great to talk with him as well. That's a key matchup there. Drake Maye era, a new era in New England, taking on C.J. Stroud and company, the 4-1 Texans. Of course, we'll have much more on all of these games coming up in just a little bit. A live look there in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And we'll get into the latest with a former Packers quarterback, Aaron Rodgers and company, struggling a little bit over the hill in New England. We'll see if it's an end of an era for him or what's to come for the New York Jets after firing their head coach. We'll have that and much more after this. All right, welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. A live look there in the New Orleans area. As you can see the Caesars Superdome in the background, all the teams vying to be one of the 2 finalists there for the Super Bowl coming up in February right here on Fox. I'm Andy Mack, back here less than 45 minutes until kickoff of the early games. But let's get into the top story that we've been following this week as the Jets have parted ways, have fired their head coach Robert Saleh. A somewhat surprising move, but a lackluster start to the season for New York as they made their way back across the pond after losing to the Minnesota Vikings. And Fox NFL saying the Jets have fired Robert Saleh. Big news, as it was somewhat of a surprise. Jay Glazer reporting that it was surprised Robert was to have this move be made. I do want to bring in right now NFL insider, author, reporter extraordinaire for Go Long TD, Tyler Dunn. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us here on Football Sunday. Now, maybe we're not surprised that it's the move that they made, but the timing of it. What do we make of this?
Here's what we're not surprised about, Andy. It's when Robert Saleh, Nate Hackett, Woody Johnson, the whole gang, when they fly across the country, Joe Douglas fly across the country to California to woo, right? To bend the knee to Aaron Rodgers and beg and plead and do everything in their power for this 4-time MVP to be their savior. This is what happens when it doesn't work out, right? I don't really care what Aaron Rodgers says publicly. I think we all, have eyes and ears and have kind of seen where this thing's been going since the start of the season. And he was bestowed some power here behind the scenes in a little finger Thronesian kind of way to manipulate the situation. I mean, if you really wanted Robert Saleh to stick around as head coach, do you think that Woody Johnson is firing Robert Saleh? Absolutely not. So there's some clear tension behind the scenes, and we'll see how this plays out. But what really isn't surprising, Andy, is the play of Aaron Rodgers, because, we both covered the Packers day in and day out at his peak. Right at his peak, it's improvisational stuff, freestyling. The play call comes in for Mike McCarthy. He crinkles it up, throws it out, and he's running outside of the pocket, finding Davante Adams, Jordy Nelson before that, working on that second reaction stuff. Well, that was a game that was never going to age well. Not like Tom Brady in the pocket, death by a million paper cuts. So, every quarterback this side of 40, they succumb to father time. And that's what we're seeing right now. The mind still is sharp. The arm still has some juice in it, but the legs are jello. He can't create like he once created. He can't operate within the structure of an offense, which, by the way, Nate Hackett runs an elementary offense. It's not a real NFL offense. So it's a mess. And that all being said, I wouldn't be surprised if they won Monday, because you usually see the post-firing jump in player performance.
Yeah, that's so very true. And there's so many different facets. And I know not a lot of people are believing Aaron Rodgers when he says that he had nothing to do with the Robert Saleh, didn't even know about it coming. But also there are so many interesting facets to the fact that they played in London. Woody Johnson, a former U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom. The fact that the Jets are on primetime after primetime after primetime. How many of these different factors do you think played a role in the decision to get rid of Saleh?
There could be some other factors, right? I'm not really plugged into ownership, but I'm sure Woody Johnson is looking at this like, what else do I have to do? We've drafted quarterbacks, Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson. One of them's 5-0. One of them didn't work out at all. He's the worst quarterback in the NFL. And here we are giving everything for Aaron Rodgers. We're taking on the contract. We're giving up draft capital. We're giving him a seat at the table. Why is this not working? Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is the one in control here. So removing Robert Saleh from the situation. Hey, look, he wasn't perfect. His record was 20-36. He's been there a while, but he is a defensive head coach, and the defense has been pretty damn good. They played well in London. They played well enough to win. I haven't seen the Vikings look that bad offensively all season long. Now, he's the head coach of the whole team, of course, but it just seems very convenient to remove him at this time when Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback. So we'll see how this plays out. Look, we both, like we said, we covered Aaron Rodgers. We've seen him just kind of internalize this and weaponize this kind of heat for good. The relax stuff, the run the table comment in 2016. But that was, a decade ago for relax, a decade plus, almost a decade from we're going to run the table. I just don't think he has it in him at this point physically. He doesn't. And, even beyond that too, Andy, Brady, he just reminds me of everything that Tim Grover, the trainer for Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, wrote about in Relentless. He is the ultimate cleaner. Yep. Like, he is obsessed with Super Bowls, reaching into your chest, grabbing your heart, throwing it on the ground and stomping all over it. Aaron Rodgers isn't that. He's not. I think he's a competitor. It's not like you get to this point, obviously you are. But I think also when you get to 40, 41, 42, 43, you've got to be a little bit of a psycho in that regard. I don't think Rodgers is like Tom Brady, and I don't think he ever was.
Yeah, there's so many different things pulling Rodgers in different directions at this point, being over the hill. And I did love in your article that you compared Aaron Rodgers, the former MVP, the former Super Bowl champion, to Karl Malone, the Utah Jazz star. And I can kind of remember you wearing maybe a note jersey of the old Karl Malone 32 jersey, and he went over to the Lakers trying to win a championship. Can you just dissect that analogy and why it works so well?
Yeah, I just think Aaron Rodgers, and he's an NBA fan, right? Well, once upon a time, we used to talk about the NBA at his locker quite a bit. So he could appreciate the analogy. There's Karl Malone, right, scoring more points than anybody in NBA history up until, 14 seconds ago, breaking records, putting up statistics, getting to the championship, and falling short. Now, Aaron Rodgers won a Super Bowl. Karl Malone never won a championship game. But I think this is what you see. You see Karl Malone and the LA Lakers, the last send-off, the last attempt at a championship, just kind of wobbling up and down the court, a has-been, a shell of what he once was. That's where Aaron Rodgers is right now. He's Karl Malone in an LA Lakers jersey.
Yeah, and I don't think many people remember that. So it's kind of an interesting contrast there to what we're going to go. I do want to ask you maybe the brittle nature of Aaron Rodgers coming off that Achilles injury. He faces the Buffalo Bills, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Houston Texans, the New England Patriots. How much are these teams really going to blitz up Aaron Rodgers and the Jets offense that is now going to take on a new look?
That's probably the telltale sign more than anything, isn't it, Andy? I mean, back at his Packers peak, if you blitzed Aaron Rodgers, that was a death sentence. You were toast. If you brought an extra safety down into the box, he just smelled blood because he would make a free runner miss, get outside of the pocket, and just rifle it across his body 50 yards. He just can't make those kind of plays anymore. He can't. He admitted as such in an interview with Kyle Brandt. It was really interesting. I thought it would be this, chummy all shucks kind of deal. And Aaron Rodgers told him, look, he's in this fight with Father Time, and they're at a stalemate. Because I'm sure his mind is trying to recreate those improvisational plays when somebody pressures him, but his body cannot respond. It was never going to respond at this point of his career. So what used to be a death sentence for these defenses, now that's what you do to beat the Jets. Just send the house. You saw Brian Flores and the Vikings pressuring the heck out of him. All of a sudden he's seeing ghosts. He doesn't see Andrew Van Ginkel take a step back, and it's a pick six. And those are the kind of plays you never ever saw Aaron Rodgers. He never turned it over, let alone threw pick sixes. That's where he's at. So if I'm a defense and I'm playing Aaron Rodgers, you're damn right. You're gonna blitz the hell out of him as much as you can and dare him to move because he can't, not like he used to.
And so many people may be waiting for Aaron Rodgers to pull the rabbit out of the hat one more time to see if he has a little bit magic left in him. And do you think maybe the New York Jets are going to try to pull Davante Adams out of the hat? Because those two go way back to the time in Green Bay. We know there are conflicting reports about him not wanting to be in Las Vegas, but we'll see where he ends up, if anywhere else other than Las Vegas. And he wants to go back to his former quarterbacks, that being Aaron Rodgers in New York, also New Orleans with Derek Carr. That's why he teamed up with him in Vegas. Derek Carr now dealing with some injuries. There's other teams floated out there, but do you think that could be a possibility that Adams lands in New York?
I'd be surprised if Davante Adams is not a New York Jet, whenever that is. Don't you love the biz too, Andy? I mean, the Raiders are sitting there not liking the offers, surely, that they're getting for Davante Adams, trying to get some leverage, conjure some leverage in this situation. And then we have the report that, hey, we don't necessarily need to trade him. Maybe we can work this thing out. Davante Adams with the hamstring designation recently is going to be traded. I don't see a scenario where he stays with the Raiders. I mean, it's been pretty bad for a while. I mean, I can remember him going on some podcasts, even lamenting the fact that he didn't stay in Green Bay with Jordan Love because he didn't know Jordan Love was going to be that good. So he will be traded. Aaron Rodgers clearly is the assistant general manager of the New York Jets. I mean, he has as many in-season coaching firings as playoff wins since 2018. So at this point, why wouldn't you give him what he wants? I think the Jets just find a way to make the money work, make the draft capital work. They already are kind of moving mountains for this quarterback. They bring in the corpse of Randall Cobb to begin with. Alan Lazard, $44 million over 4 years. I don't know. I feel like there's enough dots to connect here where Davante Adams goes to the Jets. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Does Davante Adams look at this situation and think, why would I want to go to the Jets? Aaron, we're friends. I get it. We made a lot of great memories, but you're not the same Aaron Rodgers that I played with once. And that becomes a very difficult conversation for a couple friends in this business to have. And there's one, I'll just say he's a Hall of Fame player who I know reached out to Davante Adams and was like, hey, maybe you should think about this. Maybe you should think about this because it might not be what you expect. And I know Josh Allen there in Buffalo, that might be a friendlier situation for a wide receiver if they could come to terms.
Yeah, it might be a little bit enough of separation, no matter how good friends they are, to Davante Adams to clear a little room to say, hey, it just didn't work out if that ultimately doesn't happen. And there are other suitors out there. The Chargers, notably a team, the Chiefs, a team, and the Bills are a very interesting team. And you look at the quarterbacks on that team, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. Do you think he looks at any of those quarterbacks and picks his best quarterback, his best new friend, if you will?
I can't see the Chiefs, right? Process of elimination. The Raiders trading with the Chiefs, I think it'd be more apt to see, Trump and Kamala vote for each other here in a few weeks. So I think we can cross them off. The Bills make some sense. On the field, they clearly need an A-level talent, a B-level talent, and wide receiver. This whole everyone eats mantra. Sure, it was fun when you're, wiping the floor with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I covered that game. They did whatever they wanted, and there's zero selfishness. It can work in theory, but against the elite AFC teams, you still need a dog out there. You need an alpha. You need somebody that's going to take the top off the defense, that is going to demand attention, play in and play out. Now, Davante Adams, who you see on the screen there, he may not be the receiver that we saw in Green Bay, but he is still damn good. He is still a top 10 receiver in this league. And if you're the Bills, hey, you did acquire a second-round pick in the Stephon Diggs trade. So you do have that in your back pocket, but you don't have his money. They've been in the red they started in the red more than any team in the NFL back in the spring. Even after letting a lot of guys go, they're eating Diggs' money this year, which makes it difficult. They would need the Raiders to take on a lot of that money. And the Raiders are only going to take on Davante Adams' money if the Bills are willing to part with very good draft capital, right? The league doesn't want you paying for picks, but it happens. And I think that's the Bills' best bet here. I still think it goes to the Jets for all the reasons we mentioned, but the Bills are an interesting team because we've seen it from Brandon Beane. Last year, he traded for Rasul Douglas. It worked out. I think that if it goes poorly at the wide receiver position again Monday night, Andy, like you're placing calls at Davante Adams and his camp and the Raiders trying to make something happen there. Maybe it's Romeo Doubs in Green Bay. I would be equally stunned if Brandon Beane did nothing at wide receiver at this rate.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. That is an interesting contrast to see Davante Adams go to another team within the division that Aaron Rodgers sits. So we'll see if that happens. Tyler, great talking with you as always. Always interesting. Never enough headlines with Aaron Rodgers. He's always in the headlines, always in the tabloids for something. This time it's about the Jets firing head coach Robert Saleh. Thanks again. I appreciate your time as always. Have a good Sunday.
Anytime, man. Thanks for having me, Andy.
All right, take care. All right, let's continue on here on Football Sunday. Now I'm Andy Mack, a live picture one more time there in Green Bay as we eating some cheese curds. Me and Tyler Dunn in that press box watching some Packers games, a time or two. They take on the Arizona Cardinals coming up here in this early game. I'm Andy Mack. We're back after this. Welcome back in here to Football Sunday Now, a live look there in New Orleans as the Superdome will be shake, rattling, and rolling today as they take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And fittingly, it is going to be Spencer Rattler leading the charge for the New Orleans Saints at quarterback after the injury to Derek Carr. Let's go out to Jen Hale, my conversation with her ahead of this big NFC South matchup. Back in here to Football Sunday Now, a bunch of key matchups in this week 6, including a key one in the NFC South, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the New Orleans Saints. And you see those records, 3-2 for the Buccaneers, 2-3 for the Saints. But the Saints were off to a hot start to the year, scored 40+ in their first 2 games, come back down to earth in a big way. And they also are now without their starting quarterback, Derek Carr, sidelined for several weeks. And in his place will be Spencer Rattler. We're going to be joined right now, someone on the sidelines for that game at Jen Hale. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox on this Football Sunday Now. What are we hearing from Rattler? What are we hearing from the Saints? And where's the optimism lie for this game on Sunday?
Thanks for having me, Andy. Well, there's a big question mark. So you've got 2 camps. You got those who say Spencer Rattler's a rookie. This is going to be an absolutely abysmal game for the Saints. And then you've got the other side that say, wow, he pulled out some amazing W's in college, and he's going to be able to repeat that today because the Bucs defense hasn't had a chance to scout him. So what's good about Spencer Rattler? First of all, 5th rounder, so huge arm. He can get the ball down the field to his receivers like Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. He's fairly mobile, has some decent escapability. To me, the question mark is going to be decision-making. You're going up against a Tampa Bay team that is coached by Todd Bowles. He's one of the best defensive minds in the NFL. He loves to bring pressure. He's going to do his very best to get under Rattler's skin, and he's good at that. So how does Rattler handle the pressure? And then, Andy, I know it's something you guys have been talking about all week on Fox Live Now, but Hurricane Milton, I want to see what is the psychological state of the Tampa Bay Bucs, because they left Tampa. They evacuated Tuesday. They've been in New Orleans this entire week, and the Bucs staff, I say to their credit, invited families, even pets, to evacuate with the team. So they've been spread out across multiple hotels. The routine is different. They've got all their family members there. And then you also just have the weight of what's happening to my house at home. Are my neighbors okay? So do they come out and play inspired, or are they emotionally exhausted?
Yeah, that is so very true. And the NFL, maybe more so than other sports, relies on focus, relies on motivation for those games. And I want to ask you, because Hurricane Milton, they made landfall late last week, just south of Tampa. But we saw what they did to the Tropicana Field, the Tampa Bay Rays Stadium, obviously their counterpart in Major League Baseball. Is there something to that? Do you think Tampa Bay will play for Tampa Bay today?
I absolutely know there's something to that. I've seen it over and over again, ironically often with the New Orleans Saints. So yes, will they play inspired? Absolutely. The question is, do they get emotionally depleted before the game's over? This has happened to a lot of squads over the years when there's some sort of traumatic event and they feel like they're playing for so much more than just the game. They're playing for a fan base, a city. They come out so hot and then they have nothing left in the second half. And that actually has been a hallmark of the Bucs this season. They start games so well, 24 points the last 2 games in the first halves, and then in the second half they trail off. So they're going to have to avoid that today more than ever and be able to keep that emotional energy up.
Yeah, that is so very true. A lot of emotion on the field, and for the fans, they get a little bit of a reprieve from what's going on at home so they can really dive in. And hopefully maybe Tampa Bay can give them some good news today on the field. Let's get back into the game, though, a little bit, because we talked about Spencer Rattler. You talked about that offense. We know Clint Kubiak, the Clint Kubiak attack, doing what they do there as well. Do you think he'll simplify it at all for Spencer Rattler?
Absolutely. You've got to. They're going to rely very heavily on their running game, Alvin Kamara. And I think that's what Todd Bowles is going to try to take away first is the run game. And then I think you're going to see a big day from the tight ends, Foster Moreau, Juwan Johnson. Rattler can rely on these guys a lot if he's feeling that pressure in the pocket, if he's questioning whether he's got the throws ready. Those are going to be 3 big names to circle on the Saints roster today. Certainly tight ends, running backs, a rookie quarterback's best friends, right?
Yeah, no, so very true. We'll see what they do. And sometimes coming out cold, coming out without a game plan, simplifying. We saw it in Green Bay. Malik Willis really stood tall for the Green Bay Packers with Jordan Love out, simplified the playbook and whatnot. But they did get a couple wins. All right, let's move to the major game today on Fox, and that being the Detroit Lions going down to Dallas to face America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. Both records above 500. What do we make of this game? Because the Lions coming off a bye week. Dallas hasn't played great this year, but they did get a clutch win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. What do we make of this team, and what do you think this game means for the remainder of the season?
Folks, get your popcorn ready. This is must-see TV right here. There are so many storylines in this one. First of all, everybody will remember that last matchup between the two last year. It ended with a 20-19 score. A lot of folks thought the Lions got absolutely robbed. One of their linemen, they said, didn't report as eligible. Turns out, even before the game, the Lions had told him what was going on. The Lions should have won that game. So there's the revenge aspect for sure. Then for the Cowboys, it's odd, Andy. They were undefeated at home last year. This season, they haven't won at home yet. So we're still waiting to really see that Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb connection get going. I will take you back to last season again. CeeDee Lamb had a game versus the Lions where he had 227 receiving yards. 227. You heard me correctly. So if he can repeat anywhere near that type of productivity today, it's going to be a big test for this Lions defense. I will say what will help Jared Goff a little bit, he does get his starting center Frank Ragnow back, and that is a wily veteran who could certainly be a huge plus in dissecting the Cowboys defense today.
Yeah, CeeDee Lamb feasted against the Lions in games past, and for two teams that typically play on Thanksgiving, I guess that makes sense. All right, let's talk about Jared Goff, because the last time he played a game, he did not have a single incompletion, a perfect
Incredible.
18 for 18. What makes this Lions offense go? And of course, they have so many weapons around him, the two-headed monster in the backfield, but Jared Goff hasn't let the ball hit the ground in quite a bit. What makes this offense go?
Andy, I think you just nailed it when you mentioned that backfield, the two-headed monster. It's a balanced attack, and that is so underrated in today's NFL. Everybody wants to see the splashy chunk plays, the 20, 30-yarders. And yeah, they're so much fun to watch, and they're so effective. But to get those passes, to get those types of plays to be open, you've got to keep defenses honest with a good run game. And that's why having two starting caliber running backs helps the Lions so much. And it also gives Jared Goff an outlet. If it's not there, he doesn't have to force it. He doesn't have to cross his fingers and hope, man, please let my receiver come down with this one. He can hand it off to a running back that's a proven commodity and that can at least keep you on schedule, get you a couple yards so that you don't go backwards in your productivity.
Yeah, and that's an extreme contrast to what we've seen with the Dallas Cowboys. They really don't have a running back that Dak Prescott can rely on. And I know Dak got that major deal, the highest paid quarterback in NFL history coming into this year, just minutes before that week 1 win over the Cleveland Browns. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, there were some images of them on the sideline, a little bit of maybe butting heads, kind of contrasting there. What's the relationship like between Dak and CeeDee, and how do they make this offense so special?
It's a great relationship, and that's why I'm not worried about that at all. There was a lot of drama surrounding that this week. Oh, friction. It's two guys who absolutely love football and love each other and have a great bond and truly believe iron sharpens iron. So if they have some heated moments where they're working on getting on the same page, because they haven't been yet this season, that's okay. They're going to be just fine. That's not going to be any type of bump in the road for them because of all their history. That's how they communicate. Why is it not clicking yet this season? That's a great question. But certainly today would be the day they want to do it at home, finally get that first home W in Dallas. And to your point about running backs, I want to know, when are we going to see more Zeke Elliott? Jerry Jones came out this week and said, hey, we want to keep him healthy for the postseason. Well, Jerry, you got to get to the postseason, and you got to be in a good position to have a favorable schedule. So I wonder if they don't take the bubble wrap off Zeke soon and get Dak a little help in that backfield.
Yeah, they need do it. He dropped back to 42 times last week against Pittsburgh. And of course, he wasn't sacked a ton, but that could change with a tough pass rush.
This Lions defense, yeah.
Yeah, it's very
I
tough.
would not count on that.
Let's talk about the Lions defense, because I know we watched over the first 5 weeks of the season Carlton Davis really make an impression as a cornerback for the Detroit Lions. How much will they be going head-to-head, him and CeeDee Lamb, because he always is matched up against wide receiver one?
You just circled my favorite matchup of the day, Andy. This is going to be all day long.
Yeah.
I can't wait to watch these two duke it out in battle. And then up front, Aiden Hutchinson, he leads the NFL in sacks right now. He'd love to get after Dak Prescott. That's for sure. So he has Dak zeroed in his bullseye. That's going to be his top priority today. And look, past performance, if that's any indicator, Aiden's going to get home today. And that could make for a very long day for Dak Prescott.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting one coming up a little bit later on Fox. Jen Hale, thank you as always. We appreciate your time. Enjoy the game in New Orleans and Tampa. It's going to be a good one there as well. We appreciate it as always.
Thanks for having me, Andy. Take care.
All right, thank you so much for that conversation. And of course, those two major running backs, the main guys that carry the ball for the Lions. The Lions just extended running back David Montgomery through 2027. So a good sign for them as they continue to push, hope to make another deep playoff run this year as well. I'm Andy Mack. We're back after this. All right, a live look there in New Orleans at the Caesars Superdome, the site of the Super Bowl coming up here in a few short months. It'll be here before you know it, but there's already one game in the books on this Sunday, and that happened to be played across the pond in London. Had a back-to-back games for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not a good start to this, as well as they took on the Chicago Bears in this one, and Caleb Williams, the #1 overall pick, starting to look like that #1 overall pick as he threw for 4 touchdowns in a 35-16 win. They're 4-2 after this, a pair to Keenan Allen, a pair to his big tight end, Cole Kmet. Let's bring into the conversation right now, betting analyst, friend of the program for Fox Sports Radio, Jared Smith. Jared, thank you so much for joining us. And we saw Caleb Williams really emerge this morning. It's been a slow few first weeks, now week 6, turning it up. What do we make of this, and do we ride him the rest of the season?
Yeah, and it's a timely buy for Chicago coming back from London, so he'll get a chance after his first 5 games to just kind of sit and see what's happening. And now after the buy, they play Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. And I would love to see that game flexed to a primetime spot. Unfortunately, we're not quite there yet. But it does seem like the offense is figuring things out. Although the one bugaboo, he did throw a really bad interception early in the game, underthrew DJ Moore. The deep passes for Caleb Williams, again, he played great today. He rookie records, he's going to break them all for Chicago. But if you want to win a Super Bowl, if you want to be at that high Mahomes level, you got to make every throw. He still isn't making the deep throws with accuracy, but he's improving every week. And I think for a rookie, Andy, that's really all you can ask for.
Yeah, and he's got the weapons around him. DJ Moore, like you mentioned, Keenan Allen, the rookie, Rome Odunze, as Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift. That team is going to have a lot of football to go around. What else are we looking at today? Plenty of big games, plenty of divisional matchups. What else are you keeping an eye on today, Jared?
Yeah, well, right out of the gate, we get the Eagles off the bye. Nick Sirianni shaved his head. I don't know if that's an homage to Britney Spears or it's just a midlife crisis, but a vibe refresh for the Eagles because they just got hammered by the Bucs going into the bye. They get the Browns today at home. You would think it's a get-right spot. Based on all the numbers I look at every week, Andy, Deshaun Watson might be the worst quarterback in the league. And the Philly team is getting healthy. They get Smith back today. They get Brown. They get Lane Johnson up front back. So I would expect Philly to put a big number on Cleveland today. They're laying a big number. They're like almost a double-digit favorite. So that scares me a little bit. But I think Philly today gets it done, gets a big win at home off the bye.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I don't really want to be that guy, but maybe bettors have done worse betting losing your hair, try to get that synergy right with the team as well. But that's going to be an interesting one. I know the Bucs, the NFC South, a couple divisional matchups. We've seen that really already with the Bucs taking on New Orleans, Carolina, and the Falcons. Anything that interests you there?
Yeah, NFC South, I think it's fair to say right now we're starting to see that separation. Yeah. You get Carolina, who was bad to begin with. They're playing Atlanta today. I know they're a home underdog. I know we like betting on home underdogs, but Atlanta off long rest, exciting overtime win over the Bucs last Thursday night. I think they keep it rolling today. Not really willing to lay that big number on the road, though. So we'll put them in a money line parlay, and we'll put them with the other team I think is starting to ascend in the NFC South. The team the Falcons beat last Thursday night, and that's the Tampa Bay Bucs. They're on the road today at the Superdome. And the thing about the Saints, as much as it's a very difficult place to play in that dome, it's Spencer Rattler at quarterback today with Derek Carr hurt. So there is some variance there, but I do think Tampa off the loss bounces back. So Bucs and Falcons, I think both get wins today, and we start to see both of those teams continue to ascend towards the top of the NFC South.
All right, that is going to be very interesting. And you mentioned the rookie there, Spencer Rattler, getting his first career start, but also it's a new era in New England. Drake Maye getting the start against a tough Texans team. I know Bo Nix off to a good start with Denver, but they're just 3-2. Do we go heavy? And I didn't even mention Jaden Daniels taking on Lamar Jackson in the DMV, so it's going to be a very fun one. Our rookies, how do we kind of feel about them? Are we staying away from them? Are we going with them?
Yeah, I think Jaden Daniels, it almost doesn't seem like he's a rookie based on how he's playing. Now, he is a rookie, but the 5th year, and, you know, maybe Bo Nix, you can put him in that category too, and I think that's why he's at least least stabilize things in Denver. I would obviously say Daniels is playing the best football of any of the rookie quarterbacks right now. That Denver Chargers game does intrigue me, though, because I think the under is a bet. And the reason why is the Chargers offense. So the Chargers coming off the bye, but losing more offensive pieces, even though they didn't play last week. And you get Gus Edwards is not going to play today with an injury. And this Chargers team is just a slow, methodical offense. They run one of the slowest paces in the NFL. Their average time between plays, one of the longest. So they're not exactly a quick strike offense. And the Broncos on the other side, they very much have an identity. They're a defense first team that runs the ball. They don't have a ton of deep threats. We've seen them win low scoring games. Now the total is super low. I'm seeing 35.5. If you can find a 36, that to me is a fantastic bet. Under at Mile High today between the Chargers and the Broncos later this afternoon.
Yeah, Harbaugh in no hurry to get that offense going.
Yeah.
I do want to talk to you about maybe someone that needs to pick up the pace, and that being Aaron Rodgers, the GM/QB in New York for the Jets. Do we make of anything of Robert Saleh being fired, that the Jets maybe a little bit motivated this week? Aaron Rodgers fired up, even though he says he didn't have a part into it. We'll see and hear maybe different things. Do we think the Aaron Rodgers and the Jets can pull off a win against Buffalo?
It's a good question because the professional gamblers I work with here in Vegas, Andy, they love betting. It's called the dead cat bounce. We talk about it in finance a lot. After a really tough situation, a bad loss, a coach firing, the market will move against that team. And that's when the real sharps will try to take a bite out of the Jets. And hey, listen, they're a home underdog. You would think the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, anytime they have a plus sign next to their name in the betting markets, they're going to get a lot of love. But I haven't really seen that this week. I think the situation was so toxic that we don't really know what the reaction will be. And then the real reason why I think we haven't seen as much interest in the Jets this week, the injury to Aaron Rodgers starting to pile up. We've seen knee tweaks. We've seen lower body injuries over the last couple of weeks that have made him look less than 100%. But the Jets need a win. Make no mistake. This is as a friend of mine says, they need the game like blood. So you're going to get the best effort, I think, in a primetime spot. We have seen the Jets played well in primetime. Granted, it was against the Patriots. But if I were to bet that game, I think the only way to play it is to take the home dog with the Jets.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers saying in an interview that he's at a stalemate right now with Father Time, and that does not bode well for the New York Jets. I do want to look ahead, though, a week, because it's not too often that we have two undefeated teams that are both on a bye, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Minnesota Vikings. Do you think those two teams cool off after the bye, or do people maybe forget that the Vikings are undefeated, forget that the Chiefs, people won't forget the Chiefs are undefeated, but do you think that has any factor into next week?
I think it's actually ironic, but the schedule makers really did both teams favors because both teams have really tough games next week, but they get the bye to rest. Minnesota hosts the Lions, tight line, pick 'em, and San Francisco hosts the Chiefs. So Chiefs at Niners, Super Bowl rematch. And of course, I would say the two best teams in the best division, the NFC North, both meeting next week. I would kind of lean to the bye teams. Andy Reid off the bye always does well. And I like this Minnesota team. We need to start paying attention. They have a legit chance not only to win the Super Bowl, but to get that number one seed. I think they need the number one seed in order to get to the Super Bowl because how good their home environment is. They have those pane glass panels in Minnesota that reverberate sound. So getting that number one seed, winning games in the regular season, paramount for the Vikings. They'll get a chance to do so next week against the Lions.
The Gallahorn will certainly ring those eardrums as well. I want to put up this tweet, and we're only week 6 in the NFL Super Bowl coming up in a few months, but could this be the matchup? How much are we looking at this? Because it's always interesting to see some of the teams go undefeated, go off to a great start, and then come back down to earth. Is that a real possibility? Could we see purple in the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes?
So I wouldn't because of who the quarterback is. Yeah. And I love Sam Darnold, but I can't, like when I close my eyes and I picture who's standing on the podium in the NFC and AFC championship games, Patrick Mahomes like vividly flashes in my face, but Sam Darnold doesn't. So I think Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy, I think this Niners team, frankly, losing to the Vikings in the regular season, and they look to be getting healthy. McCaffrey should be back. I would still say San Francisco, Detroit, Philly, which is where I was preseason. I'm not ready to put Minnesota in that top tier just yet.
I know many Minnesota Vikings fans would shave their head to see the Vikings in the Super Bowl, kind of a callback to what we were seeing with Nick Sirianni. Jared Smith, thank you so much. Kickoff is just moments away. I appreciate our conversations every Sunday here on Football Sunday Now.
Good luck to everyone today.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, let's continue on. Of course, lots of games to get to. Of course, the Super Bowl coming up and New Orleans, a live look there right now. The Saints hosting the Buccaneers, a key NFC South matchup. And also this, a look at Lambeau Field. The Arizona Cardinals traveling to Green Bay to take on the Packers. It looks like a little bit of a cloudy, overcast day, and that's what it is. October in the NFL, Week 6, heating up or rather cooling down there in the frozen tundra. Not quite frozen as of yet, but it might be a little bit soggy. And also a live look overseas as the first game of this Sunday already wrapping up. The Chicago Bears taking down the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jacksonville will remain in London for another game next week against the New England Patriots. I'm Andy Mack here on Football Sunday Now. Thank you so much for tuning in for this Week 6 matchup. We'll get you geared up every week here starting at 11:30 a.m. right up till kickoff. I'm Andy Mack. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be right back.